Welcome back to the Daily Dope Show. So, speaking of the Dope Show, this guy's back in the news. The dopey fucking Klansman elf guy is back. It seems like whenever this guy's up shit's creek with some kind of investigation or hearing or some shit, he always wants to come back and yell about marijuana. That's fucking getting to be like that's going to be the rhythm of this guy. But we got some bad news, guys. We got some bad news. He's talking about weed again. And the reason he was talking about weed is go figure, because they were asking him about the opioid crisis and what the fuck are you doing about that? Instead of, trying to come up with anything positive or good or helpful, you threw out the regular run of the mill, like I said before, Republican style drug war solution, which is always, you know, some kind of a dare program mixed with a whole lot of cops and a lot of judges and more DEA offices and blah 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 blah. Basically, let's take a giant sledgehammer and try to smash the shit out of the drug problem. Let's criminalize doctors. Let's criminalize patients. Let's criminalize everybody that we see that has fentanyl. And, oh, while we're at it, let's talk about weed, because we know that weed is something that we need to talk about. Always. This guy's obsession with weed is borderline, like, it's so weird. I don't know what to call it. The guy is just like, dude, you're in the wrong century to be talking about weed the way you talk about weed. I mean, everything he says about weed is as if it's some kind of thing that we barely know about. And that what we do know about it is all, bad. And because it's so dangerous, it's one of those substances that we got to approach with deep caution because it's very harmful. And he never tells you what the harms are or how bad it is. He just uses the same rhetoric that they used back in the 80s. Sessions, just please fucking go away. Get caught up in some Russian bullshit, please. Like this one. He may have lied about Russia again. Why does he keep getting away with it? Even he said something about lying under oath should be taken seriously and we should fucking, give people the maximum penalty for doing it. Well, what do we got going on with him this time? So, Tom Angel, I seen this tweet pop up earlier when I was fishing around Twitter for stories, and apparently, Sessions has nothing better to do than obsess about this marijuana shit, and it sounds like he's signaling that there may be a crackdown once again. It's getting to be kind of like cliche for, to do a story about Sessions and him not would be surprising. For him not to make some kind of a rhetorical indicator that they're still looking into this whole cracking down on legalized marijuana thing. And as we've seen time and time again, I've reported there really hasn't been any extra crackdown kind of thing going on. It's been pretty much business as usual for the DEA and the Department of Justice. So U.S. Department of Justice officials met to discuss potential changes to federal marijuana enforcement policy this week, Attorney Jeff Sessions announced. Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Quote, "We're working on that very hard right now," he said on Wednesday. "We had meetings yesterday and talked about it at some length. It's my view that the use of marijuana is detrimental and we should not give encouragement in any way to it. And it represents a federal violation which is in the law and is subject to being enforced. And our priorities will have to be focused on all the things and challenges that we face." So again, he's got the same old rhetoric that he always says. Oh, marijuana is it's bad. Marijuana is bad. Good people don't smoke it. We don't want to encourage anyone to use it by legalizing it. So nothing new here. He keeps reiterating that it represents a violation in federal law and that we're prioritizing things. What he never does, though, is say that they've kind of changed their priority situation so that they can actually enforce these marijuana laws by like doing investigations, prosecutions, raids, stuff that, you know, basically the hands-off policy for the federal government on marijuana legalization currently doesn't let them do all those things, because it's basically saying, hey, you got to prioritize what we're going to spend Department of Justice funds on. And marijuana just doesn't rise to that kind of like importancy or urgency. Sessions was responding to questions from reporters at a press conference about new initiatives to combat opioid trafficking. And yeah, furthermore, when it comes to the enforcement and all that shit and prioritizing, the thing about it is it doesn't even make any sense for the federal government to come in and crack down on legal marijuana, because if you're talking about prioritizing and you have states that already have a setup where they're like, okay, we have a system where marijuana is legal and it's out in the open so we can see exactly what's going on. And if someone's operating outside of that, then they're violating and we can go after them. But as far as like, you know, unburdening law enforcement from having to do like unnecessary enforcement and investigation and prosecution of marijuana cases, and ultimately jailing people for marijuana, which costs shitloads of money and doesn't make any fucking sense at all. So the priorities should be, you know, when the federal government's thinking about what they should go kick doors in for or where, places that have legalized marijuana sound like they got it under control. Unless you just want to pick on people for doing things you don't like. That's all that comes down to. And where's all the Republicans that are like, freedom, we love freedom? That's where are those people? This don't sound like freedom to me. Jeff Sessions trying to tell you what substance is okay or not okay to put in your body. I mean, when did victimless crimes? What's the deal with that though? There shouldn't be this giant apparatus of giant government. And that's another thing Republicans always talk about. Jeff Sessions is a diehard conservative in the regards that he's always talking about regulations and government overreach and all this shit. Dude, the drug war is the biggest government overreach and the biggest government function there is right now currently, except for the defense industry, which is basically an industry, so it basically pays for itself and it is profitable. So he said, we've got fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and prescription drugs, and marijuana and other drugs. I'm sure with that he's talking about kratom and whatever other, you know, unspecified, like experimental chemical drugs and such. So we'll be working our way through to a rational policy, he said, but I don't want to suggest in any way that this department believes that marijuana is harmless and people should not avoid it. We don't feel like it's up to you to tell us that, though, Sessions. We fucking don't care. We're basically like, you know what, fuck you. Whatever you're saying about marijuana is fucking lies and bullshit anyway. We all know that. I mean, I do this show and I try to stick with like facts and stuff that's out in the open that we know, but essentially there's a lot of stuff that's kind of hidden between the lines in the drug war, and one of them is just totally calling these fucking idiots like Jeff Sessions out on this marijuana thing. Why isn't more people doing it? I mean, you got Elizabeth Warren and Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders. What are those? The most farthest left people in the government are the only ones that have the wherewithal to stand up and say, what the fuck is going on with these marijuana laws? And I know there's a handful of Republicans too now, because they, quite frankly, live in states where marijuana is legal. They have to be like protecting the interests of the people that vote for them, as in their constituents. So they got to look out for them. That's why they're all of a sudden doing what I'm asking. Why don't more politicians just be like, what the fuck is going on? My suggestion to politicians that aren't being corrupted as fuck by lobbyists from big pharma, big alcohol, big tobacco, whoever else that you've seen over the last 2 years fighting against legalized marijuana, big lobbyists in general, if you're not being controlled by them, please speak up. Whether you live in a state where it's legal or not, man, say something about this shit. This guy can't be serious, man. We're talking about fucking fentanyl and heroin and opioids, where we're talking about people are dying every few minutes. Somebody dies of an overdose. And you're gonna fucking sit here and talk about we don't want people out there using marijuana. You sound like some dumb old grandpa that don't know shit, that's been fucking using the same rhetoric about marijuana for 80 years, dude. Unfucking believable. The comments come just 2 weeks after Sessions testified before the House Judiciary Committee that the Trump administration was continuing, at least for now, an Obama-era policy of generally respecting the rights of states to set their own cannabis laws without federal interference. Quote, our policy is the same really fundamentally as the Holder-Lynch policy, which is that the federal law remains in effect and the state can legalize marijuana for its law enforcement purposes, but it still remains illegal with regard to federal purposes, Sessions said at the time, referring to the Attorney General predecessors during the Obama administration. Sessions, a longtime vocal opponent of marijuana legalization, previously said that Obama policy on state marijuana laws remains in effect while the Department of Justice reviews potential changes. Under the so-called Cole memo, named after the former Eric Holder deputy who authored it in 2013, the federal government set out certain criteria that, if followed, would allow states to implement their own laws, mostly without intervention. Those criteria concern areas like youth use, impaired driving, and interstate trafficking. And now I also seen that the Rocky Mountain high-intensity drug trafficking report came out, the 5th volume or whatever. And, you know, and it was being praised by the DEA and all this shit. And the thing about it is that is literally how they're going to pick out the criteria, you know, like, oh, look, the Rocky Mountain high-intensity drug trafficking area report says that youth use increased, impaired driving incidences increased, interstate trafficking increased. And it's like, we know that that's how they do it with they get the data. It's a data extrapolation study. And we know how they get the statistics padded. And all this has been in play for a lot longer than since legalization. Like, they've been padding the numbers on marijuana being a bad thing for quite a long time. Just one little quick example. I always use the driving example because they get all these people. They test a lot more too. Like, they didn't used to, every time someone got in a crash, they tested everybody. They don't do that. They still kind of don't do that, but they do it a lot more than they used to. And it's to gather this data and say that, okay, when you was in this fatal car crash that you were driving, and it might or might not be your fault, you tested positive for marijuana, which means you might have or might not have smoked it that day, week, or month, because marijuana stays in your fucking system for 30 days. So they take all that and just say it's stone driving, when it's total bullshit. Even if you were the cause of the accident, it's also bullshit. They do this with everything. I mean, it's how they do it. So, is this another hint at a crackdown, or is it not? I mean, what can you really do? You know, it's not going to be a Herculean effort if you do see a crackdown, but if it's very targeted, you're probably going to see them going after the biggest players in the game or something like that. I don't even think this is something to worry about. But as usual, you gotta worry a little bit because at any time he can act like, you know, obviously they can say whatever they want and act like whether you believe it or not, we're going to run with it like it's a fact. That's the way the whole Trump administration is operating on every level, on everything, in every branch of government. And to think it's any different here with Sessions is fooling yourself. But he really should walk carefully with this. His political capital is very low right now. He's getting, salt. People hate him on both sides of the aisle. All right, he's not even a friend of Trump's anymore. But who knows? Who knows what's in store with his crackdown that he is still dreaming about, obviously. And more on that conversation where he mentioned this shit. Here we are talking about actual initiatives.
There is much more to do, and we will do more. Today, I'm announcing 3 initiatives to turn the tide. First, the department will continue to back the blue. I'm announcing more than $12 million in grants to state and local law enforcement agencies across America to take heroin, methamphetamines, cocaine, and other illicit drugs off the market. Second, I'm announcing a restructuring at the DEA.
All right, the first thing he said is he's about to just dump truckloads of money all over the country for drug enforcement to arrest more people for various drugs.
With the establishment of the first new field division in 20 years. The current Louisville district will now be the 22nd DEA field division with about 90 special agents and 130 task force officers. This field division will cover key areas: West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee.
Those are some of the most heavily hit, the heartland of America there. That's where the opioid epidemic is crushing it. The Ohio Valley, all the way down to, Birmingham, Alabama, and everything in between. And once again, he's going at the drug war like a true warrior with a big hammer like Thor.
These areas covered face similar drug threats, enabling this division to better focus on the particular threats of that region. They will be led by Special Agent in Charge Christopher Evans, who served DEA for more than 25 years.
Besides opioids, which they always act like, the fentanyl and all these opioid deaths are readily tied to some underground, like, dubious thing where Chinese fentanyl is somehow making it into the hands of everybody from Tennessee to fucking California. Where that might be a little bit true, at the same time, when you're talking about Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama and all these places, what comes to mind in my head are people that started out getting prescribed OxyContin or hydrocodone, and then the doctors either stopped prescribing them to them, or they got to the point where their insurance wasn't paying for it no more, or they were getting so addicted that they needed more than the doctors would give. And these stories always end the same. They always end up on the streets looking for them same drugs, and then they find heroin because it's cheaper. We know how the story ends. And it's not because of some dubious, crazy, like, Chinese gangsters selling fentanyl to high school kids in Utah. That's just simply not how the opioid epidemic is. I don't know what the fuck good it's going to do to spring up a bunch of new DEA offices and agents in areas where what I just described is pretty much the norm. And this isn't just, drug addicts. Like, you're painting a picture of Americans as there's some kind of menacing fucking, evil undercurrent of population that's just the dregs of society. You're talking about your fellow Americans, man. And a lot of these people want help and they want out. And you're not offering them shit. You're offering them a fucking billy club and a jail cell for a detox.
Third, and finally, I'm ordering all our U.S. attorneys' offices to designate an opioid coordinator to serve as a kind of quarterback of our anti-opioid efforts in that community.
The community he's talking about is the prosecutorial community. He's going to set up a bunch of quarterbacks that are going to fucking, you know, break people's balls, quite frankly, to fucking make opioid arrests and cases and prosecutions and fill jail cells up with these, quite frankly, the people that I just described earlier, man. If you think that you know some other opioid addicts that are going to get snarled into this, let me know. But I'm pretty sure it's just going to be the people that legitimately probably had a prescription for Vicodin or some shit at one time.
They will convene a task force of state, federal, and local law enforcement to help.
You know, when I read stories about these towns in Ohio and Kentucky and Alabama that were wiped out by opioid addiction, and they're talking about the police officers were addicted, the prosecutors in some cases were addicted, priests, people in the rehab place getting caught selling opioids to each other and to patients. This shit is fucking rampant, insane rampant. And it isn't because of the fentanyl from China, dude. This is people. You think that's how the fucking cop that was addicted got addicted? Come on, man. You're smarter than that, Sessions. I know you are.
Determine which cases to take to federal court, which ones can be better in state court. They will help customize and evaluate the effectiveness of every United States Attorney's Office's strategy to combat the opioid epidemic.
Do you hear anything in there about rehab or counseling or alternative therapy or even marijuana? I remember the opioid commission headed up by Chris Christie ignored 12,000 comments about how marijuana helped somebody off of opioids or helped somebody because they did marijuana for chronic pain and they never had to do opioids, so they never got addicted in the first place. They fucking threw those in the garbage, all 12,000 of those comments. And then they made fun of marijuana, and then they made it sound like marijuana is just as dangerous as opioids and leads to opioid deaths. So they said, fuck you to marijuana with the opioid commission. Meanwhile, this guy has no solution for you if you're hopelessly addicted to opioids and you want help. He didn't mention anything in that except for which fucking prosecutors you're going to go see, the state ones or the federal ones, when you get caught with your pills or your heroin. Is it their fault that they have the fucking pills or heroin on them by then? I mean, these people are legitimate people that got prescribed this shit at one time.
A strategy based on local conditions on the ground, and that's important because conditions are different in every area. I believe that these changes will make law enforcement more effective and the American people safer. But our work is not finished.
All right, so how's an addict safer, or how's anybody safer when you have basically cops are now going to be running around looking to grab up anybody they can with fucking opioids on them? It sounds to me like a new level of drug war insanity.
We will not slow down for one day or even for one instant, with one American dying of a drug overdose every 9 minutes. Our laws are more important.
Every 9 minutes, guys, someone dies of a drug overdose. Now, again, they snub marijuana as being some kind of a puzzle piece that you can put into this puzzle to help get us out of this fucking jam we're in with this opioid problem. But he didn't mention right there anything about marijuana being basically, you know, the one that isn't killing people. Remember in the other thing back here, he's talking about how marijuana isn't, you know, he don't want you to believe that the department does not believe marijuana is harmless. And we should tell people to avoid it. Of course, he used a weird wording there, but whatever, man. You're ignoring one of the ways we can do something about this. You don't care about this shit. You're just seeing it as an opportunity to expand the police state, expand these fucking ridiculous Fourth Amendment violations where cops are basically just taking people's shit because of a drug bust.
Than ever. We will not cede one city. one neighborhood, or one street corner to gangs, violence, or drugs. We need to use every lawful tool we have, and we will.
That's he's trying to make this shit sound like
on the streets of Chillicothe.
This shit is some kind of a shootout. Let's just watch this for 2 seconds.
Ross County, Ohio. The banner going up at the courthouse says drug-free. The kids, maybe. The adults are struggling.
Shooting heroin nowadays seems like it's just like a person drinking beer. Like, it's not. It's so common and ridiculous. It's just taking over.
This 34-year-old is talking to us as long as we don't reveal her identity. She's getting a visit from the police and sheriff because she overdosed the week before.
It was just one shot of heroin and 6 Xanax bars, though.
Jeff Sessions is a fucking hypocrite too, by the way. You guys might remember there was that law in 2016. Here, we'll just read this real quick. Attorney Jeff Sessions said Wednesday that he had been dubious of a 2016 law that effectively took away the Drug Enforcement Administration's most potent weapons against distributors and manufacturers of prescription opioids, and he would support new legislation to expand the agency's arsenal. Why don't you just repeal that fucking law right now? What's the holdup? At a news conference at the Justice Department, Sessions said that the DEA faced more challenges than it would have had the law not passed, and that he would support a new law to make sure we're fully able to carry out effective enforcement policies. This is ridiculous. Big Pharma got together, their lobbyists got together with a bunch of people in Congress, and they fucking passed this law that basically fucking took and neutered the DEA from being able to fuck with pill manufacturers. I was dubious about the law when it passed, said Sessions, who was a senator before being appointed Attorney General. Quote, I believe I was maybe the last person that went along with it after the department and DEA agreed to accept it. So he fucking voted yes for this shit. And don't tell me he didn't know what it fucking was. Of course, he sounds like he's using doublespeak up here when he's like, you know, the DEA faced more challenges than it would have had the law not passed. What kind of challenges? Like having to go to court more because fucking Big Pharma wanted to try to throw injunctions and shit and try to still operate after you seized up like a extra warehouse full of Oxycontin or fentanyl mouth spray or some shit? I don't believe a word Sessions says, man. He's a fucking liar. He gets caught lying under oath every time he fucking gets under oath. So what is the deal here? We're going to let this guy keep lying to us about everything, including marijuana and the fucking opioid crisis, where he just said he's going to throw everything except the kitchen sink and rehab and counseling at it. You know, are you going to throw some clean needle exchanges at this problem? No? Did you hear that lady in Ohio? Fucking shooting heroin is like the same equivalence as seeing someone walking around drinking a fucking beer. I think we'd have a... Did you hear yourself? Someone dies of an overdose in this country every 9 fucking seconds. 9 minutes? What do you say? I don't remember. It's just ridiculous, man. So he fucking voted for that law that neutered the DEA. And now he's acting like they can't just repeal that. We're going to have to go ahead and stick to that law, but maybe we can write another law that'll help the DEA do something. It's just bullshit, man. There's not really much else to this shit. As always, they completely act like it's this Chinese fentanyl is the main reason for this opioid epidemic that we're having in America. Hey, I got news for you, man. Fentanyl ain't the fucking main thing out there killing people. It's just simply not. And the fact that it is so prevalent out there is kind of like, it makes you wonder where you think your drug war style that you've already been doing for the last, I don't know, 100 years or whatever, 80 years, however long you've been fighting this drug war, 40 for sure, since the Nixon actual war on drugs. What the fuck has that done? Nothing. We have people lacing shit with fentanyl, killing people left and right. And we have the news talking shit about fentanyl-laced marijuana and fentanyl-laced cocaine. I don't know if I believe any of that, but this shit is definitely everywhere. It's definitely easy to get. There's definitely people dying from it all the time. But it's not the fucking... That's not the whole, pie chart of what the fucking opioid epidemic is all about. And when people get to that point where they're like, okay, cool, give me stuff with more fentanyl in it. They're out there when it comes to being addicted to something. They need help. And when they want help, you don't offer it to them. You offer them a cold jail cell at the end of a billy club. And, a couple more tips of the iceberg, of course. Like I said, Sessions is under fire from the right. President Trump and some of his most fervent supporters and right-wing figures are upset that Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation as not further investigated the Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's the biggest deal that a lot of these right-wingers are talking about. They're like, hey, over here, how come you guys haven't said anything about Hillary lately? Especially you, Sessions. How come you haven't put together a case about anything that you've heard going on? I don't know what exactly they're getting at, but I think they're talking about the uranium one thing and maybe something else, or some of that rigging the election that Donna Brazile was talking about. I don't know. The final thing about Sessions, final update for the day is so we all remember when LePage decided that he wasn't going to sign the regulation package for the main marijuana, basically recreational marijuana stores and distribution centers and legitimate grow operations. None of that shit's going to get going anytime soon, as long as LePage is around, and because he simply don't want fucking legal marijuana in his state under his watch. He's the most ardent prohibitionist in the game, up there with Chris Christie and probably Jeff Sessions. I mean, that's the top three right there in no particular order. Those guys hate marijuana more than anybody I've ever fucking heard of in my life. I mean, Harry Anslinger's like, oh, come on, guys. You're really? Like, these guys are fucking insane. Well, LePage claims that his reefer madness was something he caught off of Sessions. I'm sorry, man. I just can't believe that. I think that you are the guy. Earlier this month, Maine Governor LePage vetoed a bill that would implement recreational marijuana in the state starting in 2018. And it turns out it wasn't just his own beliefs that led to that decision, but also those of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I don't know if I believe this. LePage recently wrote a letter to explain why he vetoed the recreational marijuana bill passed by the Maine legislature. In the letter, LePage said he sought guidance from Sessions about, quote, how the federal government intends to treat the legalization of marijuana by states across the nation. The governor did not divulge what the Attorney General told him, but whatever he said was enough for him to believe signing the bill was the wrong idea. So again, is this another sign that there's a crackdown coming? Because LePage was like, oh, we're not going to let people get caught out there by the federal government when the crackdown comes. Please give me a fucking break. If Sessions did get away with trying to do some kind of crackdown, it'd be the biggest disaster for his political career I could imagine. Until I clearly understand how the federal government intends to treat states that seek to legalize marijuana, I cannot in good conscience support any scheme in state law to implement expansion of legal marijuana in Maine, LePage wrote. Whatever. You know what, LePage? You're going to be gone. In 2019, you'll be gone. So we only got to deal with your fucking dumbass, racist piece of shit. We only got to deal with you for a little over a year. Good fucking riddance. Yeah, again, the recreational marijuana package of regulations was on his desk. All he had to do was sign them, and they would basically go into effect in July, I think, maybe. I mean, obviously January, And who knows if they even would have had regulated marijuana sellable by July. But either way, they would have had something. And now marijuana is legal in Maine. There is like limits about how much you can grow and how much you can have and all that shit. I'm not exactly sure about those limits. But nonetheless, you can do everything except for have a regulated system, I guess, in Maine. So Sessions, I don't know if he was an influence in that. I highly doubt it. LePage hates weed enough without Sessions to fucking fuck shit over like that. So who cares? Anyway, bottom line is this is probably about as serious of a threat that Sessions has leveled against the marijuana industry in states where it has been legalized, and even medical marijuana. And let's not forget that the Cole memo is up for grabs on December 8th. So we'll see what happens there with the whole, like, you know, the federal government isn't supposed to interfere with state laws and shit. So all in all, I'm really not as nervous as the headlines would make you feel like you should be, because like I said, his political capital is already on fucking empty. If he pushes the gas pedal down on this one, he's just going to choke. That's the show. The next episode will be the 300th episode. I'm kind of debating whether or not to go live with it or just do a weekly show. Have a lot of stories built up, but it's going to be the 300th episode of the Daily Dope Show, the 300th clip that I've made on this channel. If you like what I'm doing and you're not subscribed, or you think you're subscribed, check to make sure. I keep getting people unsubscribed for no reason. And as I'm approaching the 1,000 mark, I just want to make sure everybody's locked in, because I think once you hit the 1,000 mark, you get taken a little more seriously. The videos get a little bit more marketed through the system. So, you know, we'll see. If all that's true, then I guess my videos will have more views on them, and that'll be pretty exciting. So anyway, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the like if you want to give me a like. I don't even know what the fuck that's for. That's all I got. Peace.